Hello, my name is Thomas Schwingle, and I am a professional cinematographer based in Los Angeles. I'm making this 6-part series of videos for freelance filmmakers, creative gig workers, and small film businesses, figuring out the nuances of contract work versus being a short-term employee is confusing. Taxes are complicated. Invoicing and dealing with contracts from a studio can be intimidating. This is not legal advice or professional tax advice. Please speak with a lawyer if you need specific consultation, and please do your own due diligence. My opinions and tips are not the only way to structure your plans. However, after many years of running my cinematography trade across multiple states, I've learned a lot and often get asked by others for input. I'm sharing what I know because I haven't seen a lot of other videos that do it. This is video number 1 of 6 in this series. When we work as crew in filmmaking, either as a grip, PA, cinematographer, or any short-term position, we are often being contracted by someone that wants to hire us. This could be because of networking we did, or a referral from a friend, or even a basic internet search. I'm listed in some production guides and have occasionally received an out-of-the-blue call from someone coming to town and needing a local cinematographer. Getting hired is pretty relaxed compared to other industries. Depending on the responsibility of the position, there may not even be an interview. They need a grip next week. You're a grip. The key grip gave out your name. Done. You got the call. For a feature film or a key position on a significant project, there will likely be interviews if you don't know the production team. But most times you get a call, hey, you want to work? And that's it. Now think of your school friends in other industries where they stress over resumes and multiple levels of interviews. They may apply to 80 jobs just to finally get a first interview. Granted, they tend to have better job security and benefits when they do get hired full-time, but we get to walk into a new office with every new production, and that variety is thrilling, even if the stress of paying the bills is always looming. When you get called for a job, they will either try to categorize you as a contractor or an employee. If they have you fill out a time card after the job, you are an employee. If they ask you for an invoice, they're viewing you as a contractor. If you run your own small production, doing the shooting and the post for a client, you almost certainly are a contractor. There can be some shades of nuance to all of this, but that is the general division. In both cases, whether an employee or contractor, the rate for your position can be negotiated. I'll talk about rates soon. A slight exception are union productions, where the departments are only hiring employees that are part of unions affiliated with the production company's contracts with said unions. In cases of union production, there is a predetermined scale of what each position will be paid, based on standard previous negotiations. You can get paid above scale, and department heads can try to negotiate for that, but as a general concept, if you're going to work on a union production, especially on the East or West Coast, the rate is generally baked in. This video is focusing on the independent filmmaker who maybe doesn't get those union opportunities or doesn't get them that often. So we will focus on this like you are running a small business, which you are. So rates. What do you charge when you get that call? When I was starting out in a smaller market, I asked the locals who did what I did. Hopefully you have some friendly locals that do what you do. If you're a sound mixer, ask the other local sound mixers what they charge. There can be some fluctuation. A woman that has mixed for 15 years can justifiably charge a bit more than someone only a year out of school. Throw a question up on your local subreddit, Discord, or area Facebook group and ask what people charge in the area. It's usually in the best interest of the market to all be on the same page. If someone new starts charging $200 more per day than the most experienced key grip in the market, that could raise some eyebrows or ruffle some feathers. The opposite is true. If a Steadicam op and his gear start working for half of what the local crew are charging, even if this guy is known to be less experienced, it could dilute the market. Maybe Mr. Half-Price Steadicam goes on vacation and he's been doing a lot of the local grocery store ads. Then that grocery store client calls a more established person as a replacement and they get sticker shock. But we only pay Mr. Half price. Well, now the expected rate at that company might be suppressed for everyone else in the market. Quoted standard area rates are usually based around commercial work, especially in small markets. Advertising, industrials, social media spots are typically the jobs that are going to go through an established production company, and that machine has been doing jobs like this for a while. There's probably a formula in place already. When you get into short films, independent features, documentaries, social media, music videos, then it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to rates. I've definitely done work that would equate to less than minimum wage if you did the math on my day rate, but it's often for a passion project, something I'm excited about, or a team I like working with. And I still do things for free for the right people or right project, or if it's a project for a nonprofit or a good organization. It's okay to volunteer for certain things, but ultimately we all need to pay our bills. A small feature film coming to town may only be able to pay $250 a day and no OT. But perhaps it's a great chance for you to finally step up and be a gaffer instead of a set electrician. And so you do it for the experience, the credit, and the opportunity to expand. Everyone has to decide for themselves what they're willing to do without sacrificing dignity, safety, or standard practices. Back to rates. Typically, when a producer, production manager, or a production coordinator calls you, they're going to have a range that fits the rate for the position they are calling about. They may already know that first ACs in your area typically charge between, $650 and $800 a day. So when you get the call and you are armed with the knowledge of what is typical, you can quote within the range that makes sense for your experience or job history. Certain positions, especially above the line crew, which is kind of the industry way of saying the creatives that are often credited in the front of a film, those positions can have more leeway. As a cinematographer, my day rate can fluctuate wildly, sometimes even in the thousands of dollars per day range. I know commercial directors who maybe make something like $2,000 for a shoot day on a small ad, or even up to $15,000 or $30,000 a day on something large. A lot of times, those highly publicized positions, the crew members that can win awards or even be famous, those positions have some rate flexibility because they're often being hired for their personal style or personal brand. Below the line crew are equally creative and important. I like when my crew come up with ideas and suggestions. I'll hire people with more experience than me because I'll learn something new and they bring value to the project. But the business is set up in a way so that those closer to the top also make more money. Ideally, that is also coming with more experience, but we all know that isn't always true. Now, there are times where you may feel that you have no negotiating power, or the production has set the rate and won't budge. You get called to be key grip and they're paying $400 for a day. The producer just tells you the rate up front. Depending on your relationship to the production, the job itself, your personal needs, you could try to ask for more and risk losing the offer, or you accept it. In the time I've been editing this very video, I've had an example of both. I had a job offer me a rate, I countered with a higher rate fitting my experience, and I held firm, and they gave it to me and booked me. I had another job this week where I found the rate below my liking, I countered with a higher rate, and the production let me go and found someone else. It's just part of the industry. If you do accept a rate that is maybe lower than what you wanted, but you did accept it, then still do your best job. You can quietly grumble with your friends outside a set, but you are more likely to get hired again if you do a good job. And maybe next time you can get hired at a higher rate. I've definitely done this. I've made it known that the rate was lower than what I usually charge, but I accepted the terms and still did a great job for the production with a smile on my face. And the next time they called, I got them to increase the rate because they specifically wanted me back. Some areas of this industry get more flexible with payment. People who work as a one-person band or creatives who are doing both the production and the post-production may have wildly different quotes. If you're showing up with your own camera and lighting gear and then are maybe also editing the project, then your quote is becoming more than just a labor rate. You are acting as a small company offering a few different services, and then the rate you charge is really a reflection of the market, your overall time, and the value of the product. You'll have to do some research to see what makes sense to charge in these scenarios. Again, you could hit a forum or Reddit and ask, hey, what do fellow creatives in Omaha typically charge to shoot and edit a 30-second social ad for a local restaurant? We're also entering a new era of filmmaking. Lately, in the winter of 2024-2025, at the time of this recording, film production has been shrinking, moving outside of the United States. A lot of people have been underemployed. Social media is the center of content, and some people are finding that they need to pivot in order to still work in filmmaking. One reason I even started doing these YouTube videos is because I was having large gaps in my work schedule, and I wasn't seeing answers to some of my specific questions. Granted, I'm not making any ad money on these videos at the time of this recording, but I found it a good way for me to use some of my professional skills and part of my cinema brain to keep myself sharp while the business moderates. Let's get back to the two types of hiring, either as an employee or as an independent contractor. When you get hired as an employee, the production hiring you has to follow certain federal rules and protocols. They are taking you on as an employee, which can seem weird to the outside world if you're only working for a day or two. More on this later. As an employee, they have to verify your employment eligibility status using an I-9 form. The company also has to do payroll, which means that they will work with a payroll company that will issue your check to you after withholding the appropriate taxes. The employer is required to pay into unemployment insurance, and you also get covered by programs like workers' compensation. Essentially, you get a lot of the protections that are required by state and federal law, such as overtime pay. I recall the first time I did a big commercial using payroll when I was a second AC. At the end of the job, the production manager handed me all the different government forms and the time card sheet, and I was lost on how to complete it. Luckily, she walked me through it, and after a few of these payroll jobs, it became pretty routine to fill these out. I prefer getting hired as an employee instead of a contractor because I know I have certain protections in place. And if I ever go into a long period of unemployment, I can file for unemployment insurance and get some kind of income for those slow months. The amount of unemployment you will receive is related to the number of total days of time card employee work that you did, usually qualified as occurring before the previous tax quarter. It's a whole thing. As an employee, you also get your paycheck in a timely manner because it is required to be processed after the completed work week. One thing that filmmakers might not like about a time card job is the high withholdings. Our day rates can make us appear to have high income. If you're getting a key rate of $75 an hour, that can appear like you're making $150,000 a year. But clearly this isn't a full-time job and you're not working every day at that rate. However, depending on how you fill out the time card withholding statement, you may get taxed like you are making six figures. It's not uncommon to expect something like a $4,000 check from a recent commercial you worked on, but then see like only $2,500 on the payment line. The rest was withheld in taxes and government programs. Some people may adjust their withholding statement on the employee paperwork in order to get more of this money paid to them immediately, instead of waiting for this excess withholding to potentially be settled in the form of a yearly tax return. I personally tend to let it go because for me, my invoice jobs and my time card jobs tend to balance out my yearly tax liability. I'll get into paying taxes as an independent contractor in an upcoming video. If you go to file for unemployment insurance in a future slow period, the state in which you worked and in which you file should be able to locate this time card record if it is within the qualifying benefits window. If you're working in a state that doesn't commonly have film production, like outside of California or New York, your state unemployment office may be confused why you only worked 1 or 2 days for 12 different companies. I've definitely had to jump on the phone and explain that I work in commercials. Sometimes I only get hired for 2 days. I wasn't fired, I was an employee, but only for that week. The Office of Unemployment might need it explained to them. It's not the norm to do very short-term time card work. Now, if you're watching this video, there's a higher chance that you've been working as an independent contractor. You get called for a job, you work out the rates and terms, and then after you do the job, you're expected to send an invoice to the production company. The benefits to this model are that in theory, you can determine your own rate and add any extra charges. You get paid exactly what you invoice for, and you have more control over how your specific business is run. For me, I've definitely done a lot more invoice work in recent years. As I mentioned earlier, you don't always get to control the rate despite being the contractor. Sometimes the production has their own number in mind and you either take it or walk away. Also, the production may not pay you in a timely manner. Chasing down an invoice that is 60 to 90 days past due is all too common. Just ask your peers. Many states have employment protections that are overseen by their Department of Labor. The U.S. Department of Labor also has teeth to offer assistance. California specifically has strong employee protections, and if you feel you've been paid too late, underpaid, or wrongfully classified as a contractor, there's a system in place to file actions. I'll speak more about this at the end of the video. It's worth knowing. I can't think of a job that completely stiffed me, but I've definitely had to go down to offices to collect a check that was like 4 months overdue. The other drawback to being a contractor is that you don't get any unemployment coverage. Some states are trying to come up with programs to cover this, but traditionally, if you run out of work as an independent contractor, you are on your own to make it through a slow time. There are some caveats to this depending on how you structure your business, but more on that in an upcoming video. Another potential drawback is that you are obligated to pay your own income taxes. All employment is taxable, so if you collect a fat check for a $10,000 gig, you are required to figure out how much you owe to the state you worked in, if applicable, not all states collect income tax, and how much you owe to the federal government, and you need to make those payments. If you don't pay it in a timely manner, you can get hit with penalties and back taxes when you file your yearly tax return. I'll do a rundown of taxes in an upcoming video. As an independent contractor, you also may not be covered by a production if something goes wrong. If you break something, they may put the blame and cost squarely on you. If someone or you gets hurt, it may be you that has to cover any medical costs. I was on a contract job once where I hit a deer on the drive home from an out-of-town gig and damaged my car. It was repairable, but only after my $1,000 auto deductible. I was fortunate that the production gave me $500, half of the deductible, basically as a gift, but that was because we had been working together for years and they were being nice. They didn't have to do that. Another contract job, my camera assistant accidentally dropped and broke one of my personal camera filters. The production had to have insurance in order to rent the whole RE package from our gear vendor, but my personal filter was my own and they refused to cover it. I personally have some of my own policies in place to cover myself as a contractor in case of a bad scenario, and I will get into that in an upcoming video. Some productions may ask you to sign a contract before working for them. Often it will stipulate that you are a contractor, you are responsible for your own taxes, you are responsible for your own car, you are responsible if you break something, you cannot sue if something goes wrong. Basically, they're covering their own ass and you are on the hook in case of injury or accident. It has gotten pretty common and I don't like it, and it may not always be legal. I was once on the second day of a job and production realized that they had forgotten to hand out the contract, so they walked around with paperwork on a break. I looked at it and one section stipulated that I had to have my own workers' compensation policy, which I don't. I told them I can't sign it because I didn't have one, and they asked me to leave the set. As in the middle of the job, I was asked to leave because I wouldn't sign something that wasn't accurate. I got paid for partial work, but that's it. I know for a fact that the rest of the independent crew also didn't have workers' comp. We chatted about it later because we're all friends. But they went ahead and signed the paper just to get along and keep their jobs. I was feeling a little righteous that week and opted not to sign, even though it lost me the remainder of the job. You'll have to make your own choice on what you're willing to sign for contract work. And keep in mind, it's a contract between two parties. It's an agreement. You can try to negotiate for changes. Depending on how rigid the company's lawyers are, you may be able to get some changes made. I've gotten small changes made for me before, but it's also just as likely that if you don't sign it as their lawyers wrote it, you can't work for them. One last note about employee versus independent contractor. Technically, an independent contractor sets their own work hours. They decide the pace of the work, what they're going to do, and they decide what to charge. If you hire someone to work on your house, they'll show up, they'll give a quote, they'll decide what day they're going to do the work, how long it'll take, and maybe the final invoice is different than the quote because of some extra work or changes. When we go to a set, we're almost always working like employees. We're told when to be there, we're told what work we're going to do and at what pace. The production decides when lunch is, not us, and the rate may be tough to change or negotiate once things have begun. In the letter of the law, we are actually working as employees, but we are often hired as independent contractors because that is cheaper for a production to do and it shifts liability over to the worker. In some states, there have been fights over this. Gig workers fighting for benefits and coverage. In California a little while back, there was a whole political campaign to get Uber and Lyft drivers reclassified as employees because they were classified as contractors even though they weren't in control of their own fares. In most cases, and especially based on my own research of California, if you are hired as part of a film crew by a production, you should be hired as an employee and paid through a payroll company. If you feel you've been improperly hired as a contractor, based on some of the information and differences I explained earlier, you could attempt to challenge the way you were hired, especially if you weren't paid for weeks or had things like overtime denied. Many states will have a link to file a wage claim through their Department of Labor, or sometimes called by other names like Department of Industrial Relations in California, for example. California has a great record of helping filmmakers receive proper payment, including additional compensation for delayed or underpaid checks. But it is also a state at the heart of filmmaking. Other states may need more information from you about the duties you perform in your job, and I'm going to go out on a limb and assume the states that are going to be more helpful are the ones that have a strong history of labor protections. The claims process can take months, but it is supposed to be designed to help you, the wronged employee. It's very unlikely the employer that you file against will ever hire you again, but that is a choice to make based on your principles and how you've been treated. For those of you that are running your own small company and seeing a project through various stages, you are likely a contractor, and some of these aforementioned legal recourses don't apply to you. It's extremely common to be hired onto a crew or small project as a contractor while the state you are working in would not define you that way. Most times, things run fine, you get paid, maybe paid later than you'd like, but you're working. However, it's not the way it should be. In the next video, I'm going to explain how you can better set yourself up as a small business. This is especially important if the majority of your work is not as an employee. Thank you for watching this video. This was number 1 of 6 in a series giving advice to film workers, independent contractors, and small businesses in the creative field. If you found this useful, please like the video. There are more videos coming, and if you subscribe, you'll be alerted when the next one drops. Thank you.